Last summer, I flew back to my hometown for a school reunion. It had been almost 3 years since I graduated from school, and aside from close friends, I had heard nothing from the rest of my classmates. The reunion took place at the school itself, lasting till midnight. I arrived home early that day, giving me time to catch up with my family before I headed down. At the reunion, almost everybody had turned up. There was food, drinks, and plenty of time to get up to date with what had been going on in everybody's lives. Boys I hadn't seen in ages gave me aggressive hugs and said things like, "Long time no see." Girls I hadn't seen in ages fussed over me in a motherly way, saying things like, "Oh my goodness," and "You're so grown up." Then, everybody went round, talking to nearly everyone else and asking and answering all manners of questions. For the first 2 hours or so, some of the teachers who still taught at the school were there, which was nice. They left before sundown. As the night drew to a close and most people began to head home, I and a few others hung around outside the school hall. I leaned against the railing and sipped a lemonade while listening to the conversation. One of the girls asked about a certain boy who hadn't turned up. "He said he couldn't be bothered," said another. "He says he's going on vacation with his college friends or something." "Typical," someone commented, and they all began to reminisce about how antisocial that particular classmate of ours had been. As they talked, my mind drifted off elsewhere. I tried to think of who else hadn't turned up. Among a few other absentees, one person stood out. Maisie, a tall, quiet girl who had been in many of my classes. "Hey, did any of you see Maisie Heathen?" I posed a question out of the blue. The others quieted down, registered the name, thought about it, and shook their heads. "Nah," said one boy. "But let's be honest, she was probably the least likely to turn up. I mean, she hardly turned up at school some weeks." "Yeah," said one girl sarcastically. "Says the guy who skipped school to play video games. At least she still got respectable grades." "Whoa, no need to get personal," the boy grinned. "Her attendance didn't really make a difference anyway. She was naturally smart." "Unlike you, right?" the girl teased him. The others continued bantering while I thought about Maisie. It struck me that she hadn't entered my thoughts for so long. 3 years at university, many miles away, with another set of friends in another town, had taken their toll. It felt like all the excitement of student life had made me move on from this small world which was my old school, and in moving on, I'd forgotten so much. "Didn't you go to Oxford or something?" I heard someone ask. I turned back to the conversation as they were talking about Maisie. "Wouldn't be surprised." "I'm pretty sure she applied there." "Yeah, and she got in. I remember Mr. Thompson congratulating her on it." "She was odd," remarked a boy named Joe. "Nice, but sort of in our own world, if you know what I mean." I nodded. I knew what Joe meant. "So, anybody know what she's up to now? Anybody in touch?" asked Joe. We all shrugged. "Maisie went missing last year," said a low voice from a few yards away. We looked to see the man's outline standing in the darkness. He stepped into the light. It was a former classmate, David, who had been eavesdropping from the shadows. "Huh?" I looked at him stupidly, feeling suddenly cold. "She went missing last year," he repeated. "They still haven't found her." We all exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Oh, come off it, David," I heard a girl say. "Stop trying to frighten us." David came and leaned against the railing beside me. "I'm really not trying to be funny," he said. "You know I'm not known for my sense of humor." It was true. David, a lanky kid with glasses, had always been rather serious. Honestly, that's what I heard at least. My parents told me about it around when it happened last autumn. People were talking about it in church. Her family was stressed. Everybody was trying to console them. Nobody said anything for a while. The party had become noticeably quiet, and people were leaving by the minute. "That's weird," a girl said. "Do you know what happened? How did it happen? Where?" I don't know the details, but I do know that she had gone on a trip alone. Apparently she wanted to get away from everything for a while, so she had booked some cottage in the middle of nowhere, gone there to live by herself, and after a few days, vanished. "That's terrible," someone remarked. I don't remember who, as I was too caught up in my own thoughts. Vanished? I wondered. What on earth could have happened? Shortly the gathering dispersed, and we all went home. Joe offered me a lift, which I accepted. We hardly spoke, and when he dropped me off, we exchanged short, sincere goodbyes. Something was seriously wrong. Maisie had disappeared and not been found. That in itself was inherently a frightening thing. But I had a nagging feeling that there was something greater behind her disappearance. Something that had been building up over the years. I felt like I knew something about what might have happened to her, but for some reason, couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. I lay awake that night, trying to think back into the past. Slowly, it all came back to me, and when it did, I shivered. Maisie had joined my secondary school in year 13, the final school year. From her first day onwards, she kept to herself. She was a tall, delicately made girl with refined features. With her prominent grey eyes and flaxen hair neatly bound into a single braid, most agreed that she was pretty. She usually sat alone in class and spent more time gazing out the window than paying attention to the teacher. In spite of this, she got high marks in most exams. And although she hardly took part in athletics, when she did turn up, she could outrun even most boys. Over time, her reclusiveness earned her disdain from some members of the class. Her high achievement only made them resent her more. I, on the other hand, felt bad whenever I saw her, and was more than a little curious to know what was up with her. She never seemed to be all there. It was as though she was constantly engrossed in another faraway dimension. At the same time, I saw it as enigmatic. Now, having thought about it a bit more, I've come to realize that her behavior was troubling, a sign that something was troubling her and wouldn't leave her alone. But as a simple 17-year-old boy, I didn't understand these things. I sometimes told my mother about Maisie's behavior, and she told me to be nice to her and be a gentleman. I remember one particular conversation we had. My father was at work, so it was just me and my mother in the kitchen. "Mom," I began tentatively. "Yes?" "You know that girl, Maisie?" "Of course I know her. You're always talking about her." "Well, she still hasn't made any friends. She literally doesn't talk." My mother smiled. "And?" "Well, I don't understand girls, and I just find it strange. Do you have any idea what could be the matter with her?" "Really, Daniel, there's no need to pry into people's lives like that. It's nosy." "But I'm sort of concerned, Mom," I said, plaintively. "That's sweet of you, but I'm sure you don't need to worry about her. Everyone has their own problems, and I think she'd prefer to keep them to herself." I thought about what my mom said, and wondered what kind of problems Maisie might have had. "Do you mean like family problems? Are her parents getting divorced or something?" "Could be, but I doubt it. I've met her parents, and they don't look like they're splitting up anytime soon. And they seem to be really nice people." I realized that I had seen them once too. They had seemed like nice people. They were the sort of gentle, charitable churchgoers who cared a lot about the community and never skipped Sunday Mass. Their daughter was different. I figured that whatever was on her mind was something very personal that she hid even from her family. But whatever could it be? My simple masculine brain couldn't get over her mysterious sullenness. You know, my mother suggested one day, if you are concerned, you could go talk to her. Perhaps she just feels isolated at this new school. You never know. It might make her feel welcome here. I considered it. I might do that, I said. Yeah, I might do that, Mom. I first spoke to Maisie Heathen on my way home from school. I wasn't expecting to cross paths with her, as I had just had after-school detention. I was likely the only one at school, apart from the caretaker. It was a chilly, blue-skied evening in October, and the sun had sunk enough to slightly darken one half of the sky. The homeward path cut through farmland at the back of the school, where the path had been demarcated with low wire fences on either side to keep students out from the fields. I noticed Maisie on the path, about 200 yards ahead of me. I realized that this was my chance and tried to walk faster to catch up with her, then ran. I noticed she looked downward slightly when she walked, but she moved quickly, and I was a little out of breath when I caught up. That's when something weird happened. When I was about 5 yards behind her, panting like a dog, she heard me and turned around with such a look of fear upon her face I'll never forget. It scared the heck out of me, seeing her face tightened into that silent, wide-eyed scream. When she saw who I was, she looked with embarrassment at her feet. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't mean to startle you. No, she said, shaking her head. I'm sorry, I thought. I'm sorry. Don't worry. I should learn to make a better first impression. I was running to catch up with you. Why? She turned around fully. Because... I tried to think of a reason. Eventually, I just told her the truth. Because I wanted to talk to you. We continued down a path through the fields and then exited onto a lane that led down to town, where I lived, and where she presumably lived. Maisie was surprisingly easy to talk to. Her manners were a little odd, but she responded to questions and even asked some about school-related stuff. I asked her what she thought of her new school, and she shrugged and said, It's okay, I suppose. You mean you don't actually like it? I remarked. No, I'm indifferent, she said, and we walked on quietly for a while before she explained. We move around a lot. I've been to so many schools that it makes no difference to me anymore. So, why do you move around? Is it because of your parents' work? She completely ignored that question and said something to change the subject. I can't remember what. I just remember it took me aback how abruptly she changed the subject. We eventually parted ways at a crossroads. I told her that if she should feel lonely at school, she should feel free to approach me. She responded with a quiet smile. It was a sweet, genuine gesture of gratitude, but something about it sent a chill down my spine. I could see through those eyes of hers that she knew something I didn't, and that she had been through things I couldn't fathom. It was a quietly haunting, fragile smile. I walked home feeling glad that I had broken the ice between us. I felt like I had been a gentleman, whatever that meant. But somehow, something still didn't feel right. The first occurrence that struck me as genuinely odd took place later that year. I took a job cleaning the school on Fridays after school. It was a warm day in early summer, and I had the task of cleaning in the theatre hall. It had been built sometimes in the 1950s and was rather grand. The seats would be full and lively whenever there were performances. On that day, I thought I was the only one there. I was carrying the vacuum cleaner to a backstage room, and suddenly the door to the back room opened, and a girl, white as a sheet, came out. I nearly screamed. It was Maisie Heathen. She had been there in the room all along. She looked terrified, as if she'd seen a ghost. "Whoa, everything all right?" I asked, laughing. She looked ready to burst into tears, then ran out of the hall, leaving me utterly confused. Suddenly I felt afraid to enter the backstage room. What on earth was in there? What had scared her so badly? Against my instincts, I went in. There was no one there. I checked all the potential hiding spaces and turned on every light and found nothing. Perplexed, I retrieved the vacuum and started cleaning. All the while I was in there, I had a sinking feeling in my stomach. The impression that something terrible would happen at any moment, causing me to hightail it out of there, white as a sheet. But nothing happened. I vacuumed the place and got out of there quickly. I never raised the topic with Maisie. The year wore on, and nothing of that level of weirdness happened. Many weeks later, however, something did happen. Not something weird. Something disturbing. Believe it or not, Maisie was actually beginning to fit in. She made some friends. Occasionally, she would engage verbally in a lesson. This turned heads, as it was strange to see someone so silently, suddenly so vocal. Not that she was particularly outgoing, she was still quiet and understated. But it seemed as though some mysterious shadow had shifted away from her. There was a summer concert in which she played a piano solo in front of the whole school. I applauded heartily. I gradually came to the conclusion that she simply had some form of anxiety earlier. Then, on the last day of term, school finished early. It was a summer day, and I had been planning on going out to the movies with some friends. It turned out that they were all going to a nearby nightclub that evening. I had no intention of joining them, as I can't stand drinking or anything to do with it, so I settled on having a quiet night at home. But as I set off along the homeward path through the fields, I noticed Maisie Heathen ahead of me, just as it had been on the first time we had spoken. But it was high summer now, not fall, and the day was cloudless. She was at ease. "Maisie!" I called as I caught up. "Do you have a moment?" She turned around and nodded. We hadn't spoken in a while. As we walked, the sound of crickets in the grass filled the air. "So," I said, after much anticipation, "do you like films?" "What?" I said, "Do you like films? You know, movies." "I don't mind them." "Would you like to see one? Tonight, at the cinema?" She seemed to be considering my offer, because she smiled quietly to herself. Then she said yes. I expressed my gladness, and when she asked why I was asking her, told her about my friends ditching me for a nightclub. That seemed to amuse her. Then I told her which movies were showing. She settled on a horror film, which surprised me. Horror? Really? She didn't seem like the horror type. "It starts at 11:30 though," I warned her. "Are you going to be able to come that late?" "Sure I can." "Then that's settled, I suppose. Shall I pick you up?" I offered. "Please." "Where should I pick you up from?" "My house." "I don't know where you live."